Namaskaram. Today I'm going to be talking about the fourth paragraph of Nāṉ Ār. This is what Bhagavan talks about in this fourth paragraph is a continuation of what he was talking about in the third paragraph, which I spoke about last time. But I think it's worth just going quickly through the third paragraph again. It's a very short paragraph because that'll put this paragraph in more context. What Bhagavan says in the third paragraph, it's just two sentences. In the first sentence, he says, if the mind, which is the cause for all awareness and for all activity, ceases or subsides, jagat drishti, that is the perception of the world, will depart or be dispelled. When he says the mind is the cause for all awareness and all activity, what he means here by awareness is awareness of things other than ourselves. That is, without the mind, there is no awareness of anything other than ourselves. In sleep, there is no mind and therefore no awareness of anything other than ourselves. In waking and dream, we have risen as mind, and therefore we're aware of things other than ourselves. And obviously, jagat drishti, perception of the world, is awareness of things other than ourselves. So what he refers to here as awareness is what he also refers to here as jagat drishti, perception of the world. Perception of the world means perception of anything other than ourselves. Since the mind is the cause for the perception of the world, when the mind subsides, perception of the world will cease. That is the idea in the first sentence. The second sentence, he says, just as unless awareness of the imaginary snake goes, awareness of the rope, which is the atiśaya, that means basis or foundation, will not arise. So long as we're seeing the rope as a snake, we don't see it as a rope. So our perception of it as a snake has to go in order for us to perceive it as a rope. So like that, unless perception of the world, which is kalpita means fabrication, imagination or mental creation. So unless perception of the world, which is kalpita, departs, darshana, which literally means seeing, but it implies awareness of svarūpa, that's our own real nature, which is the adhisthana, will not arise. That is our real nature, just like the rope is the basis for the appearance of the snake. Our real nature, which is pure awareness, is the basis for the appearance of the world. So unless perception of the world ceases, we won't be aware of what underlies that appearance, which is our own real nature. And how will perception of the world cease? Only when the mind ceases. So that's what he says in the third paragraph. So he continues, he elaborates on this more in the fourth paragraph. Because in the fourth paragraph, the question that Shivkashambalai had asked him was, after he'd said that, was, what is the nature of the mind? So he talks here about the nature of the mind and explains why the perception of the world is dependent on the mind. And why, therefore, we are not aware of our real nature so long as we're aware of the world. So this fourth paragraph is a longer one. I'll go through it sentence by sentence. In the first sentence of the fourth paragraph, he says what the mind is. Maṇam eṇbadu, ātma-sorūpattil uḻḷa, or atiśaya śakti. That means what is called mind is an atiśaya śakti that exists in Atma-svarūpa. Atiśaya śakti means an extraordinary power. And Atma-svarūpa means the real nature of ourselves. Svarūpa means real nature. Atma-svarūpa means the real nature of oneself. So our own real nature, that is the mind is an extraordinary power that exists in our real nature. This term atiśaya śakti, he used the same term in another place, but is very similar to this. That is in the verse 6 of Arunachala-ashtakam. So because that what he says in that verse 6 is very close to what he says in this paragraph, I will go through this sixth paragraph of verse 6 of Arunachala-ashtakam, just so that I can draw the parallels. In the first sentence of verse 6 of Arunachala-ashtakam, he says, "Uṇḍṛu poruḻ arivoli uḷḻa. That means there is only one substance, one poruḻ. And what is that one poruḻ? Ni, you, uḻḻam, the heart, arivoli, the light of awareness. So this first sentence means there is only one substance, you, the heart, the light of awareness. So what actually exists is only that one substance, which is you here means Arunachala, it's referring to Arunachala, and Arunachala is the heart and the light of awareness. It is that light which is ever shining in our heart as I. That alone is what actually exists. And then in the next sentence he says, uḻḷadu unnil, alladu illa atiśaya śakti. That means in you exists an extraordinary power which is not other than you. So this sentence is very close to this first sentence of the fourth paragraph, in which he says that the mind is an atiśaya śakti that exists in Atma-sorūpa. Here he said that atiśaya śakti exists in you. You is, because he's addressing Arunachala, and Arunachala is our own real nature, is Atma-sorūpa. So it exists in you, and he also says, uḻḷadu illai, which is not other than you. That is this atiśaya śakti that exists in you, it is not other than you. That means the mind, the atiśaya śakti that he refers to here, as he makes clear in that sentence of Nāṉ Ār, is the mind. So the mind is this extraordinary power that exists in ourselves, and it's not other than ourselves. And then in the next sentence, he explains how the appearance of the world is created. What he says in the next sentence is, it's quite a long sentence, and it's expressed in a very aphoristic manner. Niṇaivugaļaiyum means, in this context, means from. It implies from you. That is, niṇaivugaļai implies appearing from that. That means from that extraordinary power, which exists in you and is not other than you. Niṇaivugaļai anu niṇaivugaļai niṇaivugaļaiyum. That means along with awareness, ātma-ārī-āy, anu niṇaivugaļai, series of subtle, shadowy thoughts. And then he goes on to describe those series of shadowy thoughts. Solitarily, that means in the world of destiny. That means they're spinning in the world of destiny. World, that is. I think it's easiest if I just read the sentence, because to explain it word by word is actually quite difficult in here, and it's not so necessary. That's the meaning of the whole sentence is appearing from that. That means from that extraordinary power, along with awareness, series of shadowy thoughts spinning in the world of destiny are seen on the mirror, that is the mind light, as a shadowy world picture, both inside and outside, via senses such as the eye, like a shadow picture that stands out by a lens. So here he's referring to an analogy that he often gave, the cinema analogy. That is just like a cinema picture is projected on the screen. The world is nothing but a projection. And as he explained elsewhere, the film is our vasanas. That is, it's our vishaya vasanas, but rise as thoughts and are there projected as if an external world. So he says that the series of shadowy thoughts, they spin in the whirl of destiny. That is, whatever pictures are projected are according to destiny, and they're seen on the just like the cinema picture is seen on the screen. The screen on which the world picture is seen is the mirror of the mind light. That is, the mind itself is the screen or mirror in which this picture appears. And he described the picture as a shadowy world picture. He's referring to the picture of names and forms that constitute the world. And he talks about the world picture both inside and outside. That is, it's as if we experience two worlds. We seem to be experiencing outside ourselves, that is, outside this body, we're experiencing a world of material objects. But within our own mind, we're experiencing another world of our thoughts and feelings and so on. That's what he means by referring to the world both inside and outside. And the world we see outside is via senses such as the eye. So basically he's saying the whole world is nothing but a projection of our own thoughts. That's both the internal, the world that seems to be inside and the world that seems to be outside. In other words, both the world of mental phenomena and the world of physical phenomena all are nothing but a projection of our own thoughts. And thoughts in their seed form are what are called vasanas. And then in the fourth and final sentence of this verse, he says, Arul kundre, nindrida sendrida, niṇaivugaļai vindre. That means hill of grace. He's addressing Aruṇāchala, hill of grace. Let them cease or let them go on. They do not exist at all apart from you. That is, whether a world picture appears or doesn't appear, the background, the substance, the underlying reality, the adhisthana, the basis of all this is only Aruṇāchala, who he described in the first sentence of this verse as one substance, you, the heart, the light of awareness. That's alone what exists. So what appears of this world is nothing but you. So since it's nothing but you, let it appear or let it not appear. What does that mean? In practical terms, what does that mean? Bhagavan isn't, we shouldn't think that, oh, it doesn't matter whether the world appears or not. What Bhagavan is indicating to us here is we shouldn't be concerned about the appearance of the world. Because even when the world appears, we're still aware I am. So let the world appear or not appear, we shouldn't be concerned about the appearance of the world at all. All we should be concerned about is holding on to I am, the light of awareness that is Aruṇāchala, the heart. So if we're clinging to I am, it doesn't matter whether the world appears or not. It's only when we let go of I am and we allow our attention to go outwards that the world seems to cause trouble to us. If we're clinging firmly to I am, we can be completely unmindful of the world. We shouldn't care less about the appearance of the world or the appearance of any thoughts. All we should care about is holding on to I am. That's the implication there. It has a very, very deep meaning. So the way in which this verse is parallel to the fourth verse is, firstly, he's referring to the same atiśaya śakti. Here in this verse 6 of Aruṇāchala, he doesn't specify that atiśaya śakti is the mind, but it's implied because he says from it a series of shadowy thoughts appear. And it appears as the world. So this is all very closely parallel to this fourth paragraph, as we shall see when we go along. So as I say, in the first sentence of this fourth paragraph, he says, what is called mind is an atiśaya śakti, an extraordinary power that exists in ātma-sorūpa, our real nature, the real nature of ourself. And then in the second sentence, he says, ādu sakala niṇaivugaḻaiyum tōṭṟuvikkiṉḍṛadu. That means it makes all thoughts appear. That is, tōṭṛuvi is a causative form. The verb taṉi means to appear. Tōṭṛuvi means to cause to appear. This is a word that is often used in the sense of it projects. So we can also though it literally means it makes all thoughts appear, we can also translate it as it projects all thoughts. That's a slightly looser translation, but it is what is implied here. And he uses this verse, tōṭṛuvikkiṉḍṛadu, a few sentences later on when talking about the world, but we'll come to that when we come to it. So this extraordinary power called mind causes all thoughts to appear. And then in the third sentence, he says, niṇaivugaḻai y-ellām nīkki-p pārkkiṉḍṛa-pōdu. When one looks, excluding or setting or putting aside all thoughts, taṉi-y-āy maṉam eṇṛģu poruḻ illai. Solitarily, there is not any such thing as mind. That is, here the implication is that the mind is nothing but thoughts. So this extraordinary power that exists in ātma-sorūpa, what is it? It's nothing but thoughts. And as Bhagavan will explain in the next paragraph, and as he also explained in verse 18 of Upadesha Undiyā, of all the thoughts, the root of all thoughts is the first thought I, namely ego. Because all other thoughts are objects, ego is the subject. So it's only in the view of ego that all other thoughts seem to exist. So ego is the one essential thought of the mind. That's why he concludes the verse 18 of Upadesha Undiyā, saying that mind is only I. That means I there means this first thought I, ego. So what the mind essentially is only ego. And generally when Bhagavan talks about mind, he's generally talking about ego. Ego is if we take the mind as the totality of all thoughts, it consists of two parts, subject and object. That is, the subject is ego, object is all other thoughts. So generally, in this paragraph, in most places where he's talking about mind, he's particularly talking about the subject part of the mind, in other words, ego, which is the root and essence of the mind. That's why he says it causes all thoughts to appear. That is, ego is, though ego is itself a thought, it's also the thinker of all other thoughts. That is, it's that which causes all other thoughts to appear. Only when we rise as ego do all other thoughts appear. When ego subsides, as in sleep, all thoughts cease to exist. All other thoughts cease to exist along with it. So ego is the root of all thoughts, and it's the first thought and the root of all other thoughts. And as I say, he says that in the next paragraph also, the fifth paragraph, which we'll be talking about next time. So since he says in this sentence, when one looks, excluding all thoughts, solitary, there's not any such thing as mind. His conclusion, he then says in the next sentence, therefore thought alone, āhayal niṇaive manatin sarūpam. Therefore thought alone is the svarūpa, the very nature of the mind. Then in the next sentence, he says that up to here, he's been talking just about the mind. The mind is nothing but thoughts. And the mind is that which causes all thoughts to appear. If you remove all thoughts, there's no such thing as mind. Therefore, thought alone is the nature of the mind. That's what he said up to this point. Then in this next sentence, the fifth sentence, I think it is, yes, fifth sentence, he goes on to talk about the world. Niṇaivugaḻai tavitu, jagam eṇḍṟu poruḻ aññamai illai. That means excluding thoughts, there's not separately any such thing as the world. That is, though it seems to us that the world consists of material objects, of so many material things and forces and so on, according to Bhagavan, it's all nothing but thoughts, because according to Bhagavan, what we now take to be the waking state is actually just another dream. In a dream, whatever we see in a dream, though we see what seems to be an external world of material objects, but everything we experience in a dream is nothing but our own thoughts. It's entirely a mental fabrication. So likewise, this world is nothing but a mental fabrication. In the 6th verse of uḷḷa, Bhagavan says, the world is a form of 5 sense impressions, not anything else. That is, what we call the world consists of nothing but 5 types of sense impression. That is the sights, sounds, tactile sensation, tastes and smells. Other than this, there's no such thing as a world. What we call the world is just a coordinated picture of these 5 types of sense impressions. And then he says, in this 6th verse of uḷḷa, those 5 sense impressions are impressions to the 5 sense organs. Since the mind alone perceives the world by way of the 5 sense organs, say, is there a world apart from the mind? So wherever we look, Bhagavan is pointing to the same thing. The world is nothing but a mental creation. And as I say, in this sentence, he says, excluding thoughts, there is not separately any such thing as world. He says, he says the same thing in a different way in the 14th paragraph of Nāṉ Ār. Towards the end, he says, but in a still more brief form, he simply says, jagam eṇbadu niṇaivugaļai. That means what is called world is only thoughts. And then he goes on to say in that paragraph, jagam maṛayam-pōdu adabdu niṇaivugaļa-pōdu maṇam anandate ātma-vichara. That is, when the world disappears, that is, when there are no thoughts, the mind experiences happiness. Jagam tōṭṛuvikkiṇḍṛadu adu dukkate ātma-vichara. When the world appears, it experiences happiness. That it means here the mind experiences misery. So the world is nothing but thoughts. And so long as we're experiencing the world, well, the word he uses is dukkam. Dukkam means dissatisfaction. Is generally translated as misery or unhappiness or sorrow, but we can take it in a broader sense to mean any form of dissatisfaction. That is, so long as we're experiencing the world, we are not satisfied because we are not experiencing ourselves as the infinite happiness that we actually are. So nothing short of infinite happiness can satisfy us. So as long as we're experiencing the world, that means any phenomena, anything other than ourselves, we're experiencing dukkam, we're experiencing dissatisfaction or misery or suffering. So coming back to this, so Bhagavan's conclusion is that there's no world other than thoughts. The whole world consists only of thoughts. And then he gives further evidence for this in the next 2 sentences. He says, in the next sentence, he says, "Tūkatil niṇaivugaļai jagamum illai." That means in sleep, there are no thoughts, there is also no mind. The implication is that because there are no thoughts in sleep, therefore there is no world there. Because thoughts and world appear together. There's no world other than thoughts. And in the next, in the next sentence, he says, Jagra swapnangalil niṇaivugaḻaiyum jagamum uḻḷa. That means in waking and dream there are thoughts, and there is also a world. The implication, and consequently is implied there. Because there are thoughts, therefore there is a world. So whenever there are thoughts, there is a world. And whenever there's a world, there are thoughts, because the world is nothing but thoughts. So how does this world appear? He then explains in the next sentence with a nice, very simple analogy. That is, there is what Bhagavan is referring to here is not the analogy he uses is a spider spinning out thread from it within itself, but he's not referring to a spider's web. He's referring to spider also can spin just one thread out, and from which they can hang. So they can spin the thread out. They can spin the thread from out of themselves, and then they lower themselves down that thread. And when they want to go back up to where they came from, they draw the thread back in and they go up the thread. So it's that single thread that he's referring to. So what he says here is Silindipuchi means a spider, epidi taṉi-y-āy velil nulle nutru marapadium taṉ-uḻ irtu kolkirado. That means just as a spider spins out thread from within itself and again draws it back into itself, just like that, apadiye, in the same way, maṇamam taṉi-y-āy jagate tōṭṟuvikkiṇḍṛadu marapadium taṉi-y-āy oduki kolkiradu. That means, in the same way, the mind makes the world appear, or causes the world to appear from within itself, and again dissolves it back into itself. That is, here he uses the same verb, but he used in the second sentence. In the second sentence, he says, the mind makes all thoughts appear. The verb he uses there is tōṭṛuvi. He uses the same verb here to say the mind makes the world appear. So we can also, as I say, we can take it to mean that it doesn't literally mean project. It is used in the same sense that we use the word project in English. So it implies, just like the spider spins out a single thread from within itself and again draws it back into itself, so the mind makes the world appear, or projects the world from within itself and again dissolves it back into itself. That is, in waking and dream, we project a world. In sleep, we draw that world back into ourselves. This analogy Bhagavan uses here of the spider spinning out a thread and drawing it back into itself, I believe this same analogy is used in the Upanishad somewhere. It is generally interpreted that it is Brahman that spins out the thread and draws it back into itself. But Bhagavan here clarifies it's not Brahman. As Brahman is neither a cause nor an effect. Brahman is just pure Sat-Chit, being and awareness. It doesn't cause anything, and it's not the effect of anything. It's beyond cause and effect. What is it that causes the appearance of the world? It is only the mind. That is only when we rise as ego that we project a body, take that body to be ourselves, and through the five senses of that body, we project a world. So it is mind in the sense of ego is what projects the world. So I think in the Upanishads, it's probably said Atman projects, but Atman there doesn't mean Atman as Brahman, but Atman as ego. Atman simply means oneself. So it's we ourselves who have projected this world, but it's not ourself as Brahman, it's ourself as ego that projects the world. As what we actually are is Brahman. So ourself as we actually are just is. It doesn't do anything. So the cause for the appearance of the world is only the mind. Only when the mind rises does the world appear. That's what he says in the next sentence. Maṇam ātma-sorūpattil velipadam-pōdu jagam tōṇḍram. When the mind comes out from Atma-svarūpa, the world appears. What does he mean by saying the mind comes out from Atma-svarūpa? It doesn't literally mean the mind comes out from Atma-svarūpa, because Atma-svarūpa is the one infinite whole. There's no inside or outside for Atma-svarūpa. But when he said coming out, this is a metaphorical way of saying when the mind rises. The rising of the mind occurs within Atma-svarūpa, but so to speak, metaphorically speaking, it comes out from Atma-svarūpa, and then only the world appears. So it's only when we rise as ego that the world appears. That we can see from our own experience. In sleep, we don't rise as ego, therefore there's no thoughts and no world. As soon as we rise as ego in waking or dream, we project a body and a world and thoughts. And that body, as Bhagavan said, the world is nothing but thoughts. So when the mind comes out from Atma-svarūpa, the world appears. So the mere rising of ourself as ego, by the mere rising of ourself as ego, or the mere rising of ourself as ego is what causes the appearance of the world. Now, this is explaining very nicely what he said in the previous paragraph. In the previous paragraph, he said, so long as there's perception of the world, we cannot experience Sarupa Darshana. Unless perception of the world comes to an end, Sarupa Darshana will not arise. Sarupa Darshana means, literally means seeing one's real nature. But it implies being aware of ourselves as we actually are. So long as we are aware of a world, we are not aware of ourselves as we actually are. Why is that? Because we who are aware of the world are ego or mind. And as ego or mind, we identify ourselves with the form of a body. So long as we are aware of a world, we're aware of ourselves as if we were a body, a person in that world. And therefore, we're not aware of ourselves as we actually are. In order to be aware of ourselves as we actually are, our perception of the world must cease. Then he says that is what he goes on to say in the next two sentences. Ahayal jagam tōṭṛuvikkiṇḍṛa-pōdu sarūpam tōṭṛuvikkiṇḍṛadu. That means when the world appears, Svarūpa does not appear. Svarūpa means our own real nature. When he says it does not appear, what he means is, so long as we are aware of a world, we are not aware of ourselves as we actually are. That is the implication, but the way he says it is, when the world appears, Svarūpa does not appear. That is, Svarūpa is that which is always shining in our heart as I am. There is never a moment that we're not aware of ourselves as I am. But so long as we're aware of a world, we're not aware of ourselves just as I am. We're aware of ourselves as I am this body. It's only as a body that we perceive a world. It's only when we mistake ourselves to be a body that we perceive a world. And then in the next sentence, he says the other side of the same coin. That's in previous sentence, he said, therefore, when the world appears, Svarūpa does not appear. And then he goes on to say, Sarūpam tōṭṛuvam, within bracket, prakāsikam-pōdu, jagam tōṭṛuvikkiṇḍṛadu. When the world appears, or within bracket, shines, when Svarūpa appears, within bracket, shines, the world does not appear. What he means by Svarūpa appearing, and the reason he puts prakāsikam, shines, in bracket, is what he means by the world appearing is when we are aware of ourselves as we actually are, then the world will not appear. This, as I say, this is the main idea in the previous paragraph, and here he's explaining this idea in more detail. The key to understanding this is can be found in the fourth verse of uḷḻa, which is a very, very important verse. What he says in the fourth verse of uḷḻa, now what we see as a world is numerous forms of various kinds. So what he says in this fourth verse of uḷḻa is, Uruvum tānayin, uluhu paramatran. If oneself is a form, the world and God will be likewise. What's he mean by saying if oneself is a form? What we actually are is formless pure awareness. But whenever we rise as ego, we identify ourselves with the form of a body. So when he says if oneself is a form, he means what he implies is if we rise as ego and thereby identify ourselves as a body, the world and God will be as a form of a body. The world and God will be likewise. In other words, the world and God will be only forms. So long as we mistake ourselves to be a form, we cannot experience either the world or God as formless. But then in the next sentence, he says, Uruvum tāṉ Ār, if oneself is not a form, uvatrin uruvate kan urudal yavan, evan. That means if oneself is not a form, who can see their forms? How? That means who can see their forms and how can their forms be seen? In other words, the world and God appear to be forms only so long as we mistake ourselves to be a form. When we recognize ourselves as formless pure awareness, there's no one left to see their forms. Only that which mistakes it, only the awareness that mistakes itself to be a form can be aware of other forms. And then he says in the next sentence, a very nice principle, but he said in a very aphoristic manner, kannalal kakshiondo. The implied meaning of that is, can the seen, in other words, can what is seen be otherwise than the eye? That is, as is the nature of the seeing awareness, so is the nature of whatever is seen. So if we the awareness, the seeing awareness, which is what he refers to here metaphorically as the eye means EYE, if that which is aware of itself as a form, it will see only forms. If it's aware of itself as formless, it will see only formlessness. That is the implication of that. And then in the final sentence, he says, again, he's talking about the word he uses in Tamil is kan, that is I in English, in the sense of EYE, not in the sense of the pronoun now, in the sense of organ of sight. The I is oneself. That is as I say, he's using I here as a metaphor for awareness. When he says the I is oneself, he implies the real awareness is oneself, antamilakan, the infinite I without any limits. So the awareness that it has no limits, what is infinite or without limits is formless, because all forms are a form is a form because of its limitations. Remove all limitations, and then there's no form remaining. So the infinite I means the formless I. And since that is by implication, since we ourselves are that form, that infinite I, which is therefore formless, therefore what we actually are, our real nature, is never aware of any forms. So this helps to explain, that is, we now see the world as names and forms, but in the view of our real nature, in the view of Bhagavan, the world is, he's seeing exactly the same world, but whereas we are seeing it as a multitude of names and forms, he sees it as a one formless pure awareness. That is like, so long as we see the rope as a snake, we are not seeing it as a rope. Bhagavan is seeing the rope. The rope is, in this context, the rope is an analogy for the formless pure awareness that we actually are. And the snake is an analogy for the appearance of names and forms. So long as we are seeing these appearance of names and forms, we are not seeing the underlying formless substance, which is our own real nature. When we see ourselves as we actually are, we will see the world only as formless pure awareness, as nothing other than ourselves. This is why Bhagavan sometimes said, even for the jnani, the world is real. But what the world seen by the jnani is not the names and forms that we are seeing. It is the underlying adhara, the underlying support, the substance of what that is the jnani is seeing the rope as a rope. We are seeing the rope as a snake. So the jnani is seeing only pure awareness. That's what Bhagavan says in verse 18 of uḷḷa. Both for the jnani and the ajnani, the world is real. But whereas for the jnani, the world is limited to the extent of, reality is limited to the extent of the world. That means to the names and forms of the world. To the jnani, reality shines devoid of form as the adhara, as the basis for the appearance of the world. In other words, the jnani sees only the underlying reality, which is pure awareness, and therefore devoid of forms, whereas we fail to see the underlying reality because we mistake it to be a collection of names and forms. That is why that is what he means here when he says, when the world appears, Svarūpa does not appear. When Svarūpa appears or shines, the world does not appear. That is, so when we see ourselves as we actually are, there is no world. When we see the world, we are not aware of ourselves as we actually are. That is the meaning. So, as I say, up to this point, Bhagavan is clarifying what he had said in the previous paragraph. But then there are a few more concluding sentences of this paragraph. In the next sentence, what he says is, Manatin-sorūpattil vicharitu konde ponal tane maṇamai mudiyum. That means Manatin-sorūpattil vicharitu konde ponal. If one goes on investigating the nature of a mind, taṇi maṇamai mudiyum, oneself alone will end as mind. This is a very cryptic way of saying it. What he implies by saying this, that oneself alone will end as mind, is that oneself here means our own real nature. Our own real nature will finally turn out to be what had previously seemed to be the mind. That is, so long as we are looking at the world, we seem to be the mind. But if instead of looking at the world, we look at ourselves, if we go on investigating the nature of the mind, that is, if we keenly attend to ourselves, to who am I, if we attend to ourselves with the eagerness to know who am I, eventually we will see that what was previously seen as mine is actually nothing but ourself. And then in the next sentence, he clarifies the word he uses for oneself here is taṇ. That's a very simple Tamil pronoun, which in this context means oneself. But what does he mean here by oneself? He says in the next sentence, taṇ eṇbadu ātma-sorūpa. That means what is called oneself is only Atma-svarūpa. That's not always. Often one uses the word taṇ to refer to ego. But in this context, when he's talking about taṇ, that oneself alone ends as mind, or turns out to be what had previously seemed to be the mind, is the implication. What is that taṇ? What is that oneself he's talking about here? What is here called oneself is only Atma-svarūpa, our real nature. So the implication of these two sentences is that if we investigate the mind keenly enough, we will see that it is not, but what seemed to be the mind is actually nothing but our own real nature. What is our real nature? Our real nature is pure awareness. Pure awareness means awareness that is not aware of anything other than itself. But the mind or ego is also a form of awareness, but it's not pure awareness, it's an impure awareness, because it's pure awareness mixed and conflated with adjuncts. That is, as so long as we rise as ego or mind, we're aware of ourselves not just as I am, but as I am this body. So we are conflating this fundamental awareness I am with the name and form of a body. So again, Bhagavan is here, he's pointing out the nature of mind or ego. So long as we attend to anything other than ourselves, we seem to be mind. But when we investigate ourselves, we will find that what previously seemed to be this mind is actually nothing but Atma-sorūpa, our own real nature, which is pure awareness. And then he goes on, again, he goes on to talk about because this whole paragraph is about the nature of the mind. The mind is the cause for the appearance of the world. And what is the nature of the mind? He says in the next sentence, he says, maṇam epodum or stulate anusarate nikkam. That literally means the mind stands only by always going after or following a stula. A stula means something gross. The implication here is that it's only by identifying ourselves, only by when the mind can stand only by identifying itself as a body. Mind here means ego. Ego can stand only by identifying itself as a body. The verb he uses is he doesn't say identifying, he says anusarite. Anusari is a Tamil form of the Sanskrit verb anusri, which means to follow or go after or pursue, or to conform to. But in this, the implication here, attaching itself to. So only when we attach ourselves to, when we identify ourselves with a body, does the ego or mind stand. Taṉi-y-āy, and in the next sentence he says, taṉi-y-āy niṇaivugaļaiyum. Solitarily it does not stand. That is, we never rise as mind or ego without identifying ourselves, without grasping the form of a body as I. Here he's saying what he says in verse 25 of uḷḷa, where he describes that in verse 24, he described, sorry, I'll go to verse 24 of uḷḷa because it's very important to throw light on these last few sentences. In verse 24 of uḷḷa, he says, Jada uḷḻa in sentient body does not say I. When he says does not say I, that's a metaphorical way of saying the body is not aware of itself as I. And it's important to understand what he means here by body is he's not just talking about the physical form, as he said in verse 5 of uḷḻa, uḍal panchakosa uru. The body is a form of 5 sheaths. So whenever Bhagavan talks about body, he's referring to all the 5 sheaths. That is, the 5 sheaths are the physical form of the body, the life that animates it, mind, intellect, and will. Why are these collectively called body? Because whenever we experience ourselves as a body, we never experience ourselves as a dead body. It's always a living body. And we never experience ourselves as a sleeping body. It's always a waking body. So the fact that it's a living body means it's not just the physical form, it's also the life that animates it. That's the prana, the pranamaya kosha. And because it's not a sleeping body, it's an awake body, the mind or manomaya kosha, the intellect or vijnanamaya kosha, and the will or anandamaya kosha, they are also all experienced as one bundle as I. So this body, consisting of these 5 sheaths, is jada. And therefore it's not aware of itself as I. What is what Bhagavan says in the first sentence of verse 24 of uḷḷa. Then in the next sentence he says, Sat-chit udiyadu. Sat-chit means existence, awareness. That is the reality, the pure existence, pure awareness, which are not two different things, they're one and the same thing. So Sat-chit udiyadu. that is the fundamental awareness, the pure awareness and pure existence, it never rises. So the body doesn't say I, and Satchit doesn't rise. But ideal, uḍillā, uḍillā nāṉ Ār udikum ideal. That means in between, one thing, I, rises as the extent of a body. When he says in between, he means it's neither the body nor is it Satchit, because the body is not aware of itself as I, and Satchit doesn't rise. But this one thing that rises as the extent of a body, it's aware of itself as I, and it rises. Because it's aware of itself as I, it's not the body. Because it rises, it's not Satchit. So what is this? Then in the next sentence he says, Idu chit jadagranti. This is the knot that binds together chit and jada. Chit means, is here referring to the Satchit, the fundamental awareness I am. Jada is referring to the body. So the knot that binds these two together as if they were one, that's called chit jadagranti. Bandham, bondage, because once we limit ourselves as the extent of a body, we are thereby bound by all the limitations of the body and all the other limitations that come as a consequence of that. It is also called jivan, the jiva, the soul. Nupame, the subtle body. Ahande, ego. Ichamsaram, this samsara. Maṇam, mind. So what he refers to, what he refers to here as mind, is this ego, the false I, that rises between the body and Satchit. So then in verse 25 he says, he describes this ego as uruvatrapeya, a formless phantom ego. So since it's form, why is it formless? Because it's got no form of its own. And why is it a phantom? Because it's got no substance of its own. That is, it borrows its form from a body and it borrows its substance from Satchit. But it is neither the body nor Satchit. So it itself is a formless phantom. So how did this formless phantom come into existence and seem to exist? That's what he explains in verse 25. Urupatri undam, grasping form, it rises. Urupatri nikkam, grasping form, it stands. This is what he's saying in this verse 4 when he says the mind always stands following something gross. What he refers to here as orostulate anusarite is what he refers to in verse 25 as urupatri, grasping form. That is, identifying itself with the form of the body it stands. And he says, taṉi-y-āy nīlladu in this paragraph, in this fourth paragraph of Nāṉ Ār, it doesn't stand alone. So coming back to the to this this verse 25 of Uļļa, urupatri undam, grasping form, it comes into existence. Urupatri nikkam, grasping form, it stands. Urupatri undu miha ongam, grasping and feeding on forms, it flourishes abundantly. Uruvittu urupatram, leaving form, it grasps form. That because it can't stand without, it can't stand alone. So as soon as it leaves one form, it grasps another form. But tedinal otam pidikam, if sought, it takes flight. Why is that? Because ego, that is, whatever, ego itself is a formless phantom. So long as it's grasping form, so long as it's identifying itself with a form, it's grasping things other than itself. So without grasping something other than itself, something gross, as he says in the fourth paragraph, it cannot stand. So if it, instead of trying to grasp any form, if it tries to grasp itself, that's what he means by tedinal, if sought. That means if ego tries to grasp itself, if it tries to attend to itself, otam pidikam, it will take flight. In other words, it will subside and dissolve back into its source. So the nature of ego is such that it rises and stands only by grasping the gross form of a body. and by itself it cannot stand. So if it tries to grasp only itself, Tedina lotum piticum, the thought it takes flight, it will subside and disappear. And then in the final sentence of this fourth paragraph, he says, maṇam sukshma sariram eṇḍṛum jivan eṇḍṛum solūpattil. This is the same that he said in the final sentence of the 24th verse 24 of uḷḷa, where he said that this he described this I that rises between the body and satchit as he describes the ego, mind, chitta granti. He also describes it as the term he uses is nūpame. That means subtle body. Here he uses the Sanskrit term sukshma sarira, and there he also calls it jiva. So here he says he refers to it as jiva. So the mind, what is called jiva, is nothing but the mind. In the sense of ego. Ego is the first thought. The reason he also calls it sukshma sarira, this is a different interpretation to the usual sense in which sukshma sarira is used in Vedantic texts, because generally 5 sheaths are classified as 3 bodies. The annamaya kosha, the sheath composed of food, in other words, the physical body is called the stula sarira, the gross body. The pranamaya kosha, manamaya kosha, and vijñānamaya kosha are collectively called the sukshma sarira, or subtle body. And the fifth and subtlest of all the sheaths, the anandamaya kosha, is generally called the karana sarira, the causal body. And they then say, when the stula sarira dies, when this gross body dies, what then goes on to take a new body is the sukshma sarira. That is how it's usually explained. So because of that explanation, that it is as if you listen to traditional explanations of Advaita, they say that what transmigrates is the sukshma sarira and jiva. But Bhagavan is just saying that what Bhagavan implies here is what transmigrates is only ego or mind. That is, it's only that I takes along with it its Vishaya vasanas. Or all its vasanas, but most of its vasanas are Vishaya vasanas. It takes its vasanas. Those vasanas are what are called the karana sarira, or anandamaya kosha, also called chittam. That is what it takes along with it. Those vasanas are the seeds that then get projected as the other 4 sheaths, as the intellect, the mind, the prana, and the gross body. All these are, when the gross body dies, all these subside back into the karana sarira, in other words, into the ego's will. And what ego takes with it is only its will, its vasanas. And those vasanas are what are projected again in the next dream, is projected as a new body, a mind, and intellect, and so on. So all the 5, all the 4 grosser sheaths, in other words, the physical body, the prana, the mind, and the intellect, they are contained in seed form within the karana sarira. That is why it's called karana sarira. Karana sarira means the causal body. That karana sarira is ego's will, because vasanas are the seed form of all our likes, dislikes, desires, and so on. So the seeds from which everything sprouts are the vasanas. And whose vasanas are they? They are ego's vasanas. So it is the very nature of ego to have vasanas. To have vasanas means inclinations. So ego's inclinations are what as Bhagavan said, the whole world is nothing but a projection of our vasanas. Because we have Vishaya vasanas, that inclination to experience Vishayas, phenomena or objects, we project all these objects. So when when this present life, this present dream, which we take to be our life, comes to an end, all the other four sheaths merge back into the Karana Sarira, which ego takes with it and goes on to project a new from those vasanas. That it projects those same vasanas as a new world and a new body and mind and intellect and everything. That's why Bhagavan says, but the mind alone. Here, mind means the ego, the subject. Because, as I say, the term mind, in some contexts, it means all thought. It means a collection of thought. But what the mind essentially is, as he says in verse 18 of Upadesha India, is only this root thought I. In other words, ego. So the implication of this final sentence is that ego itself is both the Sukshma Sarira and Jiva, as he said in the final sentence of verse 24 of Uḷḷa. And the reason he says it's Sukshma Sarira is when it is said that the Sukshma Sarira is carried on to the next life. This is the meaning. It is ego itself that is carried on. It takes with it its vasanas. So according to Bhagavan, all the five sheaths are gross. Relative to ego, they're all gross. Because ego is a formless phantom, whereas the other five sheaths are all forms. They consist of, that is the Stula Sarira consists of, it's composed of food. In other words, it consists of physical matter. The prana consists of life. That life is subtler than the physical matter. Subtler than the physical matter is the maṇam kosha. Maṇam kosha means the gross functions of the mind, perception, memory, thinking, feeling, and so on. Subtler than that is the vijnānamaya kosha, the intellect, and subtler than the intellect is the anandamaya kosha, the will, the vasana, because they are the subtle seeds. But subtler than all of these is ego. So that's why Bhagavan says ego is the subtle body. Everything else is relatively gross. Even the vasanas are relatively gross compared to that because the vasanas are subtle forms, which are relatively gross compared to the formless phantom, which is ego. So that is why Bhagavan uses the term Sukshma Sarira here in a much deeper and subtler sense from the sense in which it's usually understood in Advaitic texts. So I think I've explained this paragraph. As I say, Bhagavan will continue the same theme in the next paragraph, where he analyzes the mind more deeply. But the mind isn't just, that is, I'll just give us a brief preview of some of the ideas in the next paragraph. What he says in the next paragraph, he says, of all the thoughts that appear or arise in the mind, the thought called I alone is the first thought. The thought called I means ego, the subject, because all other thoughts are objects. The thought called I is the subject. And then he says, only after this rises do other thoughts rise. That is, without a subject, there can be no objects. So other thoughts depend on the ego, because it's only in the view of ego that they seem to exist. So their seeming existence depends upon the seeming existence of ego. And then he, in the final two sentences of that paragraph, he says the same thing, but using different terms. Only after the first person appears do second and third persons appear. Here, the first person refers to ego, Second and third person is all other thoughts, all phenomena, all other things. Without the first person, second and third persons do not exist. So what the mind boils down to is only this first person, the thought called I or ego. Everything else depends for its seeming existence upon this ego. So anyway, as I say, I think I've explained this this fourth paragraph in enough detail now. As you can see, there's a lot of very, very deep ideas packed in this paragraph, very deep ideas and very important ideas, because why Bhagavan puts so much emphasis on that the world is nothing but a creation of our own mind. In all of Bhagavan's teachings have practical implications. If we understand that everything we see, everything we perceive, everything that appears to us is nothing but our own mental fabrication, it's nothing but a dream, then only will we be willing to let go of this appearance and cling to, will we be willing to turn our attention away from all this appearance back to the one to whom it appears. To whom does it all appear? To me. That is, that me there is ego. So what is this ego we then need to investigate? If we go on it, as he says here, if we go on investigating it, we will find it's nothing but our own real nature. That's what he says in those two sentences. If one goes on investigating the nature of the mind, that means if we go on attending to I, to the first thought I, our real nature alone will be revealed as that which has appeared as mind. Just like if we look at the snake carefully enough, it will be clear that it's nothing but a rope. But we need to look at it carefully in order to see that. Likewise, we need to investigate ourselves keenly in order to see what we actually are. So but we'll be willing to investigate ourselves keenly, only when we're willing to let go of everything else. And we'll be willing to let go of everything else only when we are firmly convinced that this is nothing but a creation of our own mind. None of this world has no existence whatsoever, independent of our perception of it. It is all just a dream. So just as, so long as we're dreaming, whatever we're experiencing in the dream seems very real. It seems very significant to us. But as soon as we wake up, oh, it was all just a dream. It loses its significance. It's no longer important. Likewise, we need to be so indifferent to the world, like we're indifferent to whatever we experienced in a dream. We need to be so indifferent to the world in order to be able to cling to ourselves so firmly. That's why Bhagavan said in the end of verse 6 of Arunachashtakam, let it appear or let it not appear. It's not apart from you. So you here means Arunacha, who is Atma-sorūpa. So that is what we need to cling to. We need to cling our attention. We need to attend only to I am. And everything else will merge back into I am, which is the source from which it all appeared. That is, both subject and object will merge back into the source. Because the objects appear only in the view of the subject, and the subject rises only when it looks at the objects. When it turns back to see itself, it merges back into its source. So in all these, Bhagavan is laying the foundation of his teachings here. He's giving us the clear understanding that we require in order to go deep in our investigation of ourselves.